I'll talk a little bit so you can get us set however you want. As I was standing there, I thought, the Lord gave me this message. He gave me this title.
Yeah, that's right.
It's possible. So I'm going to begin this and end it in Colossians, and just in between there, I'm going to go to a wonderful story in the Old Testament, sandwiched in the middle of Colossians there, for an example. I want to start in the last chapter of Colossians just to provide a framework around what I want to talk about today. So Colossians 4, verse 5. Conduct yourselves with wisdom toward outsiders, making the most of the opportunity. So just like when Jesus expounded on the second great commandment, to love your neighbor, by asking, who is your neighbor, I started to think about who fits outsider to me. Now in the verses before this in Colossians, Paul is asking for their prayers to include God opening doors for them proclaiming the mystery of Christ. So it's important, it's obvious, to see outsiders as those who have not heard or believed. That is our calling. To reach out to anyone, to look for opportunities, to open up doors, to make opportunities. But what impacted me was also seeing how I interact. I expanded out on that outsiders, because I knew it could mean more than just reaching unbelievers. So what impacted me was seeing how I interact with anyone who sees or does or likes something differently than I do. So look at the next verse, verse 6. Your speech must always be with grace, as though seasoned with salt, so that you will know how you should respond to each person. So think about that. So that you will know how you should respond to everybody. It's possible that we should know how to respond any circumstance, any situation. I like that comparison about that we don't ever back up to the wall. We've got an open door. And before I read two verses from his closing remarks, these were the last verses in Colossians before he goes into his closing remarks. I want to point out the time frame that Paul wrote this letter in. He was in prison in Rome. So in other words, this was after his missionary journeys. So this is the part from his closing remarks where he's doing all these, mentions a lot of names and those kind of things. It isn't so much teaching. So Colossians 4, verse 10 and 11. Aristarchus, my fellow prisoner, sends you his greetings, and also Barnabas' cousin, Mark, about whom you received instructions. If he comes to you, welcome him. And also Jesus, who is called Justus. These are the only fellow workers for the kingdom of God who are from the circumcision. And they have proved to be an encouragement to me. So that phrase, from the circumcision, that's how they labeled the believers back in that day that still held on to so many Jewish customs and traditions passed down in the law. Paul, through the years, he had a number of difficult situations. He had disputes, conflict, as he interacted with them. Because look at Paul's history. I mean, he was from that history. He was a Pharisee of the Pharisees. But I think by this time, I mean, think of what Paul had gone through. I think he learned a lot. However you want to put it, maybe that he mellowed, or that he didn't change his beliefs, but I think he learned how to interact with others. What I'm referring to as outsiders, people that see things a little different. He was able to be encouraged by some he had previously had sharp disputes with, and he called them fellow workers. In other words, he says they're in my team. They're my partners. And we don't know why Mark left Paul when he was on that missionary journey with Barnabas, but imagine the mutual benefit as they later learned to encourage and work with each other. It was a benefit to Mark. Mark was a benefit to Paul. And think what they accomplished reaching people because they worked together. Does this necessarily mean that they changed and saw everything eye to eye in what they believed? That they met in the middle, they compromised, somebody changed their opinion, their belief? So I thought about it from my perspective. Can we walk with the Lord from the moment we are born again? Of course. That's what Jesus looks for. Does Jesus wait until we have all of our doctrine right and all of our behavior perfect before he uses us to reach and touch the lives of others? Think about that responsibility, touching other people's lives, touching lives of his children, his people. Does Jesus wait? I wouldn't be up here preaching because I ain't perfect, I don't have everything right. If Jesus extends that kind of grace to us, is it possible for us to extend that same grace to each other? Doctrine is important. Behavior is important. And they both can be learned and they both can be corrected. But don't let what's important get in the way of what's really important. Now I'm going to go back to the Old Testament. This is just it's a beautiful story. It's Ruth. So kind of get the time frame of when Ruth was. It was in the time of the judges, so this is before the kings. And the reason I'm going here is because it's an incredible story about the interactions between people. It's the story of Ruth, Naomi, her mother-in-law, and Boaz. It tells the story largely through their conversations and interactions between them, so it provides a real window into their hearts. The background is a man and a wife and their 2 sons. They're from Bethlehem. They moved to Moab during a famine. And the people of Moab, they were descendants of the son of Lot's oldest daughter. Lot was Abraham's nephew. So in other words, the son of Abraham's brother. So in other words, the Moabites were descendants of Abraham's brother. So you think that would kind of be a connection? They didn't get along very good. I mean, through history. There was a lot of disputes. So they moved as a family of 4, but in Moab, the father, Ahimelech, died. The 2 sons each married, and they lived about 10 years. So think of that time frame. A lot of years passed. They lived about 10 years in Moab before both sons also died. So Naomi was left alone with her 2 daughters-in-law in a land without any of her relatives. That's not an easy life. They didn't have welfare. They didn't have social agencies. I mean, they took care of people took care of people. But she didn't have close connections. When she heard that the famine was over in Judah, she left to return and told her daughters-in-law to go back to their mother's houses, find new husbands, enjoy a new life. She'd make it somehow. She was going to go home to her family. So one did turn back. One, Ruth, she refused to leave Naomi. Naomi pushed her and said, come on, make some sense of this. You know, why would you stick with me? Go back. You'll have a good life. And so this is where I want to pick up on the dialogue. Now, I'm going to be reading a few blocks of verses at a time, so just give me a little grace and stick with me. Because it's the actual dialogue, their conversation, their interaction that I think really opens up the window to their heart. So now, starting in Ruth, chapter 1, verse 16. Ruth said, do not plead with me to leave you or turn back from following you, for where you go, I will go. Where you sleep, I will sleep. Your people shall be my people. Your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. She lays out devotion. She didn't care about anything else in her life. May the Lord do so to me, and worse, if anything but death separates me from you. Now, this is chapter 2 now, verses 1 through 4. Now, Naomi had a relative of, well, I should kind of fill that in a little bit. So they went back to Bethlehem. The whole city was in a stir because Naomi came back. No husband, the sons, just a daughter-in-law. So Naomi had a relative of her husband, a man of great wealth, of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. So Boaz was of her husband's family. And Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, please let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain, following one in whose eyes I may find favor. And she said, go, my daughter. So she left and she went and gleaned in the field. And what gleaning is it's picking up the scraps. The harvesters go down through the field, they cut the grain, they pick it up in sheaves, they pile it up. They don't waste time picking up the itty-bitty scraps. And that's where the poor people who didn't have anything else, the widows, etc., that's how they got their food. So she went and gleaned in the field after the reapers, and she happened to come to the portion of the field that belonged to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. Now behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem and said to the reapers, I really like this. May the Lord be with you. And they said to him, may the Lord bless you. I have always loved that greeting, that exchange between Boaz and his reapers. Think about this. This man was a man of great wealth. And it shows how he valued his men, his servants. He didn't show up and instantly launch into demands. Work harder. Why isn't this done? He was a man of great wealth, but as we learn later, during harvest, he slept in the field under the stars. No wonder they responded to his greeting with the same warm blessing. You can tell that that's the way he always treated them. But noticing a woman in the house, he asked the head over the reapers who she was. So now I'll pick up in verse 6. And the servant in charge of the reapers replied, she is the young Moabite woman who returned with Naomi from the land of Moab. And she said, please, this is what she had said to the head of the reapers. Please let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves. So she came and has remained in the morning until now, and she's been sitting in the house for a little while. Then Boaz said to Ruth, "Listen carefully, my daughter. Do not go to glean in another field. Furthermore, do not go on from this one, but join my young women here. Keep your eye on the field where they reap. Go after them. Indeed, I have ordered the servants not to touch you. When you are thirsty, go to the water jars and drink from what the servants draw." So this was a total stranger. But the whole city had learned how she took care of this destitute widow. And she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and this is what she said to him: "Why have I found favor in your sight, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner?" Boaz replied to her, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law after the death of your husband has been fully reported to me, and how you left your father, left your mother, the land of your birth, and came to a people that you did not previously know. May the Lord reward your work. May your wages be from the Lord, full of the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." And then listen again to what she says. "I have found favor in your sight, my Lord, for you have comforted me, and indeed have spoken kindly to your servant, though I am not like one of your female servants." Why did Ruth bring up the point? Why did she say, "I'm a foreigner"? Why did she say, "and not like the other women"? Outsiders, she was a foreigner, she was from Moab, she wasn't from Judah. Outsiders naturally feel that way. If I was to go to another country, I would feel like an outsider. Put yourself in their shoes. So it is our job to bridge that gap. Ruth continued day after day gleaning in his fields. When they came, it says it was at the start of the barley harvest. And it said they continued through the wheat harvest. So the barley harvest was first, and then the wheat harvest. They had feasts for those different times. So this would have been a while that Ruth was getting up day after day, going out into Boaz's fields. But she not only brought back the grains that she gleaned from the fields, but that the meals for the reapers that Boaz provided, he made sure that Ruth got these special portions. And Ruth would eat enough to fill herself up. She stashed the rest. Help with this, just didn't bump something there. So she was taking home the rest for a snack, taking them home for Naomi. Just picture that heart. Love and devotion, it goes far beyond expectations or what you perceive as an obligation. When it springs from your heart, it's just the way you naturally act and respond. Now keep in mind, I'm thinking about all of this in regards to how I want to interact with people that aren't just exactly like me. So now Ruth chapter 3, verse 1. We kind of do a shift here. But keep in mind that this was a long time that transpired doing the same thing. Now her mother-in-law Naomi said to her, "My daughter, shall I not seek security for you, that it may go well for you? Now then, is Boaz not a relative with whose young women you were? Behold, he is winnowing barley at the threshing floor tonight." Wash yourself, therefore, anoint yourself, put on your best clothes, go down to the threshing floor, but don't reveal yourself to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. And it shall be when he lies down that you take notice of the place where he lays down, and you shall go and uncover his feet, lie down there, and then he will tell you what to do. And so Ruth said, all that you say, I will do. Although Naomi's advice to take a bath, add some perfume, and wear your best clothes is good motherly advice, I want to share a verse that impacted me when I read it as a high school boy. And it's been a guide to my life ever since. Proverbs 19, the first part of verse 22. What is desirable in a person is his kindness. Now that's kind of a mouthful to say something really simple. If you boil it down, it basically says kindness is attractive. What makes a person, what is desirable in a person, what makes a person desirable or attractive is kindness. Boaz married Ruth, and their great-grandson was David. And I think God intentionally brought a diversity into the natural lineage of the family Jesus was born into. Because really, family stuff meant so much, their heritage. And I think people could easily get off on the wrong track. But you think, really, who is an outsider to our Heavenly Father? Why would he look differently on a Moabitess little woman than he would on a daughter of Judah? So I want to add one more other thing before we leave this story, and that is this shift here. This whole time, Ruth was serving Naomi, taking care of Naomi. What shifted here now was Naomi realized, I want to look out for you. I want to make sure that you're taken care of. So Naomi, how did she know that Boaz was going to be she told Ruth that earlier in the day before she went out, this is Boaz is going to be here. So Naomi was basically setting this up. Why? Naomi wasn't setting it up for herself. It's just like you look at the benefit of Ruth. Ruth didn't leave her country thinking that she was going to get something, that there was a bright future ahead of her. She wasn't going for adventure. She wasn't going for a husband. She wasn't going for wealth. She was going to take care of this destitute widow. That's all she cared about. So now it's shifted. Naomi isn't doing this for her benefit. She wants Ruth, if it'll work out, to be taken care of by Boaz. That was her intention. That is humility again. Just like Ruth following, not seeking her own. So looking on the needs of others first. Look what that can spring in your life if you're not seeking your own. Boaz was an upright man. He would do things the right way. So he purchased the family field from Naomi. So think about that. That probably set up Naomi for the rest of her life. And I know from reading this account that was not Naomi's intention. And Naomi got the chance to fill out her days as a grandmother. It changed Naomi's life. So I want to finish by going back to Colossians. Colossians 3, 12 to 14. So as those who have been chosen of God, holy and beloved, put on a heart of compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, bearing with one another, forgiving each other, whoever has a complaint against anyone, just as the Lord forgave you, so must you do also. In addition to all these things, look at this slow. In addition to all these things, put on love, which is the perfect bond of unity. That's the NASB translation, and which is usually pretty literal, but they actually put the literal in the margin. And the literal translation would be the uniting bond of perfection. Now that's a pretty subtle difference, but it's worth thinking about. Love is what unites. So in other words, you could put it this way, the perfect uniting bond. Love is the perfect uniting bond. It's love that unites. And it's perfect. That's the description or the modifier. It's not the object. The world will know we are Christians by our love. It isn't because that's what Christians do, and it is what we do, called to do. But it's because, look at that verse. If love is the action, if love is what's producing the unity, love isn't just what Christians do, it's what transforms us to be like Christ. That's how outsiders will know we're Christians. It's not the action of loving, thinking, oh, they're loving people. It's because the very action, the very purpose of our heart, our life's being controlled by love, has changed us. When we're born again, we got a clean slate. We've got purity. But it's like Adam in the garden. God didn't create Adam as a baby. He created him in the form of a man. But think about it. Adam, he didn't have any life experiences from day one. He had to walk. God gave him the commandment to subdue the earth, replenish the earth, fill it up. But God knew that would take time. Adam was like a clean slate. As the weeks went by, as the years went by, he grew, he learned. Think about when we're born again, we're not born knowing everything, being totally capable, having the experiences of dealing with people, experiences of turning loose the Spirit. We're a clean slate again. But our Christian life, our Christian walk is a journey. And that journey will grow, will transform. And I guess that's what I want to get to with giving grace, treating people. We're not all at the same spot. We may not all have had the same, we obviously don't all have the experiences. We might like different foods. Just go on and on and on. But there is a way, like it said, it's possible that we should know how to respond. anyone, to everyone. Did Jesus have a heart of compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience? You know, what we were just called to in those verses in Colossians? Does he bear with us, forgive us? Is there anything in us he could have pointed out as a complaint? That's not the way Jesus dealt with us, complaining. He's our intercessor now. So if we don't yet see something the same way as he sees it, does he still walk with us? I'm talking about Jesus now. Does he still delight in moving amongst us? Does he still jump for joy when we demonstrate the kingdom and his power in this earth, just like when he sent out the 70? You know, Jesus, he was, you could say he was dancing. He was so excited when those 70 came back, and he says, I saw Satan falling. Maxine and I just celebrated our 50th anniversary. And if I was letting myself, I would be jumping for joy instead of just clapping like you all did. Our children and that was a week ago Friday. Our children and grandchildren surprised us with a dinner party at an amazing restaurant. And the grand finale of the evening was an almost 40-minute video that they assembled from pictures of our life, of those years together, 50 years with our family and friends. All 6 of our children and most of our grandchildren were there, including those who traveled from across the country, and they surprised us. But you know what? Any of you that are fathers and mothers out there, you know this. Even if you had brothers or sisters, you know this. All of our 6 children are different. They came from the same mommy, grew up with the same daddy. They're different. I mean, they're a lot alike, but they are 6 different people. And all the children from their families, our grandchildren, we have 17, they're all different. That's the treasure. When they got married, we're talking about my kids, when they got married, a huge delight for me was a son-in-law or a daughter-in-law joining our family. I treasured what they added. Even something simple like a different way to do something, a different recipe, which would become a favorite of ours. And our grandkids, they have a saying, Grandma gives the best back rubs. Grandpa tells the best stories. It was a common way that we put them to bed when they were spending the night at Grandma's house. But some of their favorite stories that they like to hear was when I'd tell a story from the family, but not tell them who it was. And they would love to see who could be the first to guess who the character was in this story. Now think about it. If everyone in my family was a carbon copy, if they were all the same, I wouldn't have so much fun material to pick for stories. God is our Heavenly Father. He's our Heavenly Grandfather. He loves how we're different. Think about it. When God created Adam, this is before he created Eve, he brought all the animals before Adam Did he bring them up and then say, okay, now Adam, this is what I want you to call this one? No, he wanted to see what Adam would come up with. Let's have that same delight when we work with each other. You know, I'm music background. I grew up in my grandma and grandpa's house, so I grew up a lot with classical music. I mean, so there's a lot of music that I have a natural love and appreciation and affinity to. But you know what? I should mention to you that the first two of our granddaughters that got married, they both married Hispanic men. Wonderful men. Not only brought a lot of good food, but I kind of like their music. When we get these visitors from Uganda, you know, the Amani Milele children, to see how they, one of the songs they like to do when they travel is to worship in the African way. What does that mean? Drums and more drums. They love it, and I've grown to love it. It's, how many different languages are there in this world? Who know? I don't know. God's listening to them all at the same time. How many different kinds of worship is there? Steve, he spent however many years in Africa. He could attest to that they worship different there. So does God put up with their worship? Or does he love their worship? Does he jive with their drums? Does he move with their rhythm? A Latin rhythm is different than an American rhythm. And you get going on it, and it's fun. So hopefully I have painted enough of a picture of what this meant to me. God created Adam and Eve and told them to replenish the earth, to fill it up. And man screwed up. He spoiled it. He ruined it. So Jesus, God had the plan from the beginning. So Jesus came and restored us. But he left us to fulfill that commandment, to fill up this earth, to replenish the people, to fill it up with the people of God. Jesus is going to come back when we get the job done. And we need each other. I'm not going to do it. How much could one person do? It will happen through the unity, His love produces. It's possible, and it's happening.